December 27th, 2025. My Huskies were playing in the back, guys, so just excuse that. But what you're looking at is a section of the book called The War of Gods and Men. It's book 3 of the Earth Chronicles by Zechariah Sitchin. And it's very long and very detailed. It comes from, a lot of it's from Sumerian texts, and they tie it in with Old Testament history. It goes way back, and it comes all the way really up until the first millennium BC. Now, we know that the king line started 450,000 years ago, but we're now up into, some of this would go into the 3rd century, or 3rd millennium, not century, excuse me, 3rd millennium BC, then 2nd and 1st. Anyway, in the Bible, Seth was supposed to move into Africa. He had gotten into some trouble, if you remember. But in the text, he decided to settle in the land between Lebanon and the sea there, and Jerusalem and all through that area. But that was going to create a big problem. Then you look at the Sumerian text, and the reason why. Remember, after the first flood, the land that was through Iraq and Babylon and all there was flooded, was covered in mud, they said. And it wiped out the first spaceport. Then I showed you the images to where they had moved it over, and you had Jerusalem and Baalbek and the pyramids involved in the new spaceport. Well, this is a battle over that land, and it's called the Second Pyramid War. So I'm just going to kind of give you some information about it. I mentioned it in the video earlier today, but it's a battle that, again, it goes back to Ham and into the Old Testament. But what we're dealing with here is through the Sumerian texts, the two so-called gods with the little g's was Enlil and Enki. Now, Enki was the one that warned the humans and told them to build the ark, and you know the rest of the story. Enlil was the one who was not happy about the humans and wanted to get rid of them. But Enki, and with K-I on the end of it, you can remember that, who was good and who was bad, by K-I could stand for kindness. He was kind to the humans and tried to protect them. Anyway, we're dealing with the Second Pyramid War, and there's a battle going on over this territory. Enlil wants it, Enki wants it. And they never got along. They were half brothers. And what had happened was Enlil was Anne's firstborn, but when Enki was born, he was born from a different mother, and somehow the rank changed, and it was always a battle between Enlil and him who was going to be the heir to the throne. This goes back a long ways, guys, way back in time. These people lived a long time. Anyway, here we are. Now, they've rebuilt the spaceport there in Jerusalem, Baalbek, the landing zone, down to the pyramids, and down into Africa. This involves a lot of that territory. So through Marduk and through Ninurta, which was one of the generals in the Enlil clan, the ones that wanted the humans destroyed, they come into the Giza area where the pyramids are, and there's a big battle. Now, Enlil's group has a weapon, a magnificent, sounds like a big laser that can just cut through the enemy, can blind you, and all of that. And so Enlil's group destroyed the city, but Enki, Thoth, also mentioned in the Sumerian text and, of course, the Egyptian text, and it's all very close, same people in the Old Testament in a lot of places. You'll find out, looking at Daniel, I think it's chapter 10, about Daniel having to wait for the archangel Michael, because Michael said he had to fight the prince of Persia for 21 days. You remember that? Now, even in the modern versions of it, people realize that the prince of Persia was also some type of god. He was not a human. Michael could have just wiped him out. But it kind of goes along with some of that information. Anyway, so here we got the city's wiped out. Enlil and his group, run by Ninurta, his general, they think they have victory. But what happened was, again, Enlil and his group retreated into the Great Pyramid, and it was impenetrable at that time. And so they built up defenses within it, and on the outside a shield, and there were some very unique items in the pyramid at that time. Anyway, and then what happened, Nergal, this is where we're going to start. The pyramid was surrounded by Enlil's troops. Now, I'm paraphrasing, so bear with me. But the pyramid area, that plateau was surrounded by Enlil's troops. In other words, they were shutting it down. They were cutting off food supplies. Nothing could get in. It was a standoff. It was a siege. Well, Nergal at night snuck in with some weapons and some of his troops. He was friends with Enki. He broke through the defenses on the outskirts of the Enlil troops, got into the pyramid, brought with them food and water, because Enki and his group were without food and water, and they were in bad shape. But anyway, here comes Nergal, broke through the outer ranks that were surrounding them, just like any battle you could imagine, with a bunch of troops and a bunch of weapons. Anyway, it says, as Nergal joined the defenders of the Great Pyramid, the formidable house which is raised up like a heap is what that stands for, he strengthened its defenses through various ray-emitting crystals, mineral stones, positioned within the pyramid. There was one on top, too. Now, we're going to get into the 12th planet before this series is over with, and that has to do with the travel through the solar system. And if anybody has ever read those earlier books, you'll realize that they had crystals aboard the ship for communication, guidance, all of that, energy. They knew the art of the crystals. And so we're going to find out there were a lot of them in the pyramid, and my question is, which is not told in the Sumerian tablets so far, were these crystals brought to Earth? Because you had ships that would bring in 50 Annunaki at a time for thousands of years to mine the gold, remember? And then they changed the DNA in man and let man do the job. But anyway, over all this time, did they bring these crystals in? They were powerful, big, huge, beautiful crystals, different colors. Again, one was on top of the Great Pyramid. But he says, again, he strengthened the defenses of the pyramid through the various ray-emitting crystals, the mineral stones positioned within the pyramid, the water stone, the epic stone, the stone the Lord Nergal increased its strength, the door for protection, to heaven its eyes he raised, dug deep, that which gives life, in the house he fed them food. Now, a lot of people say, and I agree with them, that when he raised up this protection, it was a shield. Because Enlil's group had this, it was like a laser beam weapon, guys. It would make your heart stop. People grabbed the hearts when that thing was gone, would come at you, and it would wipe out cities. Now, remember, Ninurta, the general for Enlil, he wasn't real happy because I think he kind of got chewed out because they destroyed the city, but not the enemy. And there's Enki and his group. Thoth was there in the tablets. And now Ninurta and his men are inside, protected, again, without food and water until Nergal got there. So here's Ninurta has to come up with another plan, again, Enlil's general. With the pyramid's defenses thus enhanced, Ninurta resorted to another tactic. He called upon Shamash to cut off the pyramid's water supply by tampering with the watery stream that ran near its foundation. The text here is too mutilated to enable a reading of the details, but the tactic apparently achieved its purpose. Huddled in their last stronghold, cut off from food and water, the besieged gods did their best to ward off the attackers, Until then, in spite of the ferocity of the battle, no major god had fallen a casualty to the fighting. But now one of the younger gods, Horus, famous in Egypt, right? We believe was trying to sneak out of the Great Pyramid. He was struck by Ninurta's brilliant weapon. They were waiting. They knew people would have to try to break out. And this laser, whatever it is, brilliant weapon, and he lost the sight of his eyes. And an olden god then cried out to Ninhursag, reputed for her medical wonders to save the young god's life. And she came in like a mediator. She was very powerful also. All of these people were. And then it goes into what the clay tablets are saying. It said, at that time the killing brightness came. The house's platform withstood the Lord. Until Ninhursag there was an outcry. The weapon my offspring with death is accursed. And so what we're going to see here is that she steps in, makes a peace treaty that really wasn't a peace treaty, but we're going to look at why the pyramids were there, how they worked, and what happened. Now, other Sumerian texts call this young god's offspring who did not know his father, an epithet befitting Horus, who was born after his father's death. In Egyptian lore, the legend of the ram reports the injuries to the eyes of Horus when a god blew fire at him. So here we go, Egyptian into Sumerian, again mixing in with the Old Testament. It was then responding to the outcry that Ninhursag decided to intervene to stop the fighting. Again, she was like a healer, but also a warrior. The ninth tablet of the Lugal E-text begins with the statement of Ninhursag, her address to the Enlilite commander, that's Enlil's group, her own son Ninurta, the sons of Enlil, the legitimate heir whom the sister wife had brought forth. In telltale verses, she announced her decision to cross the battle lines and bring an end to the hostilities. To the house where cord measuring begins, that's their name of the Great Pyramid, where Ashur his eyes to Anu raised. Anu is the great god of Nibiru. I shall go, the cord I will cut off for the sake of the warring gods. She wanted to end the war. Her destination was the house where cord measuring begins, again, the Great Pyramid. Ninurta was at first astonished by her decision, again, the general. We're dealing with Ninurta and her. He was astonished to enter the enemy land, but since her mind was made up, he provided her with clothes which should make her unafraid of the radiation left by the beams. In other words, as they're beaming in there, blinding people and destroying the city, it looks like they were using nuclear beams. Now again, Enki agreed to the surrender. She came in there promising everything would be cool. There was, however, a condition. The surrender was subject to a final resolution of the conflict until the destiny-determining time shall come. Promising to relay Enki's conditions, Ninhursag went to address Enlil. The events that followed are recorded in part in the Lugal E-epic and in other fragmentary texts, but they are most dramatically described in the text titled, I Sing the Song of the Mother of the Gods. And they're talking about her surviving in great length because it was copied and recopied throughout the ancient Near East. The text was first reported by P. Dorm in his study Le Souverain des Dieux. It is a poetic text in praise of Ninmah, the great lady, in her role as Mami, mother of the gods, on both sides of the battle lines. So Ninmah, you've heard of that name, and her are the same people. Opening with a call upon the comrades in arms and the combatants to listen, the poem briefly describes the warfare and its participants, as well as its nearly global extent. On the one side were the firstborn of Ninmah, Ninurta, and Adad. Adad, guys, if you did a hard study, you'd find out he was later called Apollyon. Soon joined by Sin, which was Suin, and later on by Enna, or Ishtar is what they called her. On the opposing side are listing Nergal. Remember, he's the one that broke into pyramid and brought him supplies. A god referred to as Mighty Lofty One, Ray Marduk, and the god of the two great houses. The two great pyramids of Giza had tried to escape camouflaged in a ram skin Horus. And that's when he broke out, he had put a ram skin on him to appear as an animal. It didn't work, he got blinded. Anyway, asserting that she was acting with the approval of Anu, the father of these gods, Ninhursag took the surrender offer of Enki to Enlil. Enki, remember, he said, we'll do this, but we want an agreement that the conflict is over. Kind of sounds like Zelensky, doesn't it? Anyway, she met him in the presence of Adad while Ninurta remained at the battlefield. Oh, hear my prayer, she begged the two gods as she explained her ideas. Adad was at first adamant, again, Apollyon. Presenting himself there to the mother, Adad thus said, we are expecting victory. The enemy forces are beaten. The trembling of the land he could not withstand. And so what he's saying is, we really have them. They're trapped in there. You know, there's not a whole lot of concession that would help other than saving some time. It says, if she wants to bring about a cessation of hostilities, Adad said, let her call discussions on the basis that the Enlilites are about to win. In other words, we've got them surrounded. They back down into their last stronghold. Get up and go talk to the enemy, he said. Let him attend the discussion so that the attack will be withdrawn. Enlil, in less forceful language, supported the suggestion. Enlil opened his mouth. In the assembly of the gods, he said, whereas Anu at the mountain the gods assembled, warfare to discourage, peace to bring. That's what Anu wanted, just like any, I guess, parent would be. So, and as he dispatched the mother of gods and Ninurta, he said, let the mother of gods be an emissary. Turning to his sister, he said in a conciliatory vein, go appease my brother, raise unto him a hand for life. From his barred doorway, let him come out again. Enlil message through her to Enki. Doing as suggested, Ninhursag, his brother, went to fetch, put her prayers before the gods. She informed him that his safety and that of his sons was assured. She's talking to Enki now, okay? You can come out, everything's going to be cool. As Enki hesitated, she said to him tenderly, come, let me lead you out. And as he did, he gave her his hand. She conducted him and the other defenders of the Great Pyramid to the Hursag, her abode. Ninurta and his warriors watched the Enkites depart. So here you got the general, his troops, sitting outside the lines. Here she comes in, walks out of the enclosed, the seas, and they're sitting there watching. And here comes the information, guys, so when we know what's written, what was in the pyramids and why they were there. And so when here, again, picture this. You've got Enlil, his troops, through Ninurta, watching them walk out. And they realized the great and impregnable structure stood unoccupied and silent. Nowadays, the visitor to the Great Pyramid finds its passages and chambers bare and empty, its complex inner construction apparently purposeless, in niches and nooks meaningless. It has been so ever since the first men had entered the pyramid, but it was not so when Ninurta had entered it, circa 8670 BC, according to our calculations, unto the radiant place, yielded by its defenders. They came out. Ninurta had entered, the Sumerian text relates, and what he had done after he had emerged changed not only the Great Pyramid from within and without, but also the course of human affairs. There was a lot of knowledge, information, and power lost about what's about to happen. When for the first time ever Ninurta went into the house, which is like a mountain, he must have wondered, again, this is the general of Enlil, he must have wondered what he would find inside. It was conceived by Enki and Ptah, planned by Ra and Marduk, built by Geb, equipped by Thoth, defended by Nergal. He broke in, remember. What mysteries of space guidance, what secrets of impregnable defense did it hold? Because you'll find out that what they had in there allowed contact like a big space station or a spaceport. It had weapons to defend itself with. It said in the smooth and seemingly solid north face of the pyramid, a swivel stone swung open to reveal the entrance way, protected by the massive diagonal stone blocks, just as the text lauding Nurhasag. And you can see these areas like this if you look at some of the modern YouTube videos or whatever of people going there and filming it. And you'll notice a lot of slots like this, and people really didn't know what they were for. But it says a straight descending passage led to the lower service chambers where Ninurta could see a shaft dug by the defenders in search for subterranean water. He had shut their outward water supply down. But his interest focused on the upper passages and chambers. There the magical stones were arrayed, minerals and crystals, some earthly. In other words, they found them here, some heavenly. Remember I said in their spaceships they had crystals for guidance, power, probably weaponry. Some the likes of which had never been seen. From them they were emitted the beam pulsations for the guidance of the astronauts and the radiations for the defense of the structure. Not only that, guys, what is left is you've got the construction of it is got so much crystal in it, in those rocks, that it's almost like a piezoelectric deal. So with the energy inside of it, it makes me wonder, as like an inductor in a transformer, was it also reacting with the crystals in the structure that we see now? It says, escorted by the chief mineral master, the general inspected the array of stones and instruments. As he stopped by each one of them, he determined its destiny: to be smashed up and destroyed, or to be taken away for display, or to be installed as an instrument elsewhere. You know, this thing works pretty good here. We're going to probably have to have another spaceport or whatever, but what he didn't want was Enki and his group to ever have these weapons again, because they could not penetrate the pyramid. To take them out, they had to starve them out. But you know, when Ninurta said that they found where they had dug down to try to find water because their supply was cut off. Remember, several months ago, we were showing images of these long shafts beneath the pyramids, and if you got the power of these stones and crystals to create a shield, to beam to outer space coordinates, to have weaponry involved with that, then you had that type of energy. If you were digging, it wouldn't be with shovels that you were digging. That was my point. As he looked at each one, he decided its destiny. In the order in which Ninurta had stopped by the stones from the text inscribed on tablets 10 through 13 of the epic poem in Lugal, it is by following and correctly interpreting this text that the mystery of the purpose and function of many features of the pyramid's inner structure can be finally understood. Going up the ascending passage, the general reached this junction with the imposing grand gallery and a horizontal passage. Ninurta followed the horizontal passage first, reaching a large chamber with a corbelled roof. Again, look at the illustration. Called the Vava in the Ninhag-Sag poem. And if you look at the cuneiform, other Sumerians, that's what the V is. This just what you're seeing right there. Anyway, its emission and outpouring, which is like a lion who no one dares attack, came from the stone fitted into the niche that was hollowed out in the east wall. It was the sham destiny stone, emitting a red radiance which Ninurta saw in the darkness. It was the pulsating heart of the pyramid, but it was anathema to Ninurta, for during the battle, when he was aloft, some of the craft a 75-foot wingspan. Not their spacecraft, their earthcraft. And it was just like you see in the Sumerian text. Anyway, for during the battle, when he was aloft the stone, strong power was used to grab to kill me. With a tracking which kills to seize me, he ordered it pull out, to be taken apart, and to obliteration be destroyed. He never wanted to be attacked by that rock again. Now, this is just an AI illustration of what that may have looked like, guys. No one really knows. We don't have any, they didn't have Polaroids, or the film didn't make it this long. But it's very similar to the inside of the great chambers and all, especially on the lower levels. You see the bottom. But again, these different type of crystals were aboard the craft that came from Nibiru to here. And again, once they realized that they had to move from the Persian Gulf, just wasn't getting enough gold through that process into Africa, the ships started coming in with 50 Annunaki at a time, back to back as workers. Because, and then after 100,000 years, that's when the DNA change came about with man. And of course, another illustration here, but it talks about, we're going to read a little more, about a capstone. They found this quartz capstone that they slid off the side and destroyed. And guys, I've mentioned this before, but you've seen pictures of the Great Pyramid where about 2/3 of the way up, the bottom white marble overlay is gone. And they said it was torn off to build cities and houses and buildings around that area. I agree they used the stones, but they got knocked out by the great floods and the pyramid wars. That's what destroyed that. And you can see how high that great flood came through there at that point. There were 2 big floods. Anyway, the top stone was a guidance stone, possibly also a weapon. Now the general, he returns to that junction of the passages inside the pyramid. Nadurla looked around him in the grand gallery. And ingenious and complex as the whole pyramid was, this gallery was breathtaking and a most unusual sight. Compared to the low and narrow passages, it rose high, some 28 feet, and 7 overlapping stages, its walls closing in even more at each stage. The ceiling was also built in slanting sections. You've seen pictures of that. Each one angled into the massive wall so as not to exert any pressure on the segment below it. Whereas in the narrow passages only a dim green light glowed, the gallery glittered in multicolored lights. Its vault is like a rainbow. The darkness ends there. The many-hued glows were emitted by 27 pairs of diverse crystal stones that were evenly spaced along the whole length of each side of the gallery. Imagine that, guys. Instead of the barren walls that you see now when people have tried to come up with anything they could think of to what all the uses were, why, or who built it. We're getting down to super advanced technology that we may see again. It said again, the 7 pairs of diverse crystal stones that were evenly spaced along the whole length of each side of the gallery. These glowing stones were placed in cavities that were precisely cut into the ramps that ran the length of the gallery on both sides of the floor. All of that's still there, firmly held in place by an elaborate niche in the wall. Each crystal stone emitted a different radiance, giving the place its rainbow effect. For the moment, the general passed by them. On his way to his priority was the uppermost grand chamber in its pulsating stone. Atop the grand gallery, he reached a great step which led through a low passage to an antechamber of unique design. There were 3 porticos, the bolt, the bar, and the lock of the Sumerian poem, elaborately fitted into grooves in the wall and the floor, hermetically sealed off the uppermost great chamber. To foe it is not open only to them who live, for them it is open. But now, by pulling some cords, the porticos were raised and Ninurta passed through. Remember when the Mammy, the mother of the gods, was going there, she called it the Great Pyramid, the house of the measuring of the cords. Anyway, he was now in the pyramid's most restricted sacred chamber. from which the guiding net radar was spread out to survey heaven and earth. Again, spaceport. The delicate mechanism was housed in a hollowed-out stone chest placed precisely on the north-south axis of the pyramid. It responded to vibration with bell-like resonance. The heart of the guidance unit was the GUG, the Direction Determining Stone. Its emissions, amplified by 5 hollow compartments constructed above the chamber, were beamed out and up through 2 sloping channels leading to the north and south faces of the pyramid. You've seen the drawings. Ninurta ordered the stone destroyed, then by the fate determining. But Ninurta on that day was this Gug stone from its hollow taken out and smashed to make sure no one could ever attempt to restore the direction determining function of the pyramid. Ninurta also ordered the 3 porticos removed, first to be tackled where the Eshu, or the vertical stone, and the Kesara, or awesome pure which opened stone. Then the hero stepped to the Sakhal stone, which means sturdy stone, which in front. He called out his full strength, shook it out of its grooves, cut the cords that were holding it, and to the ground set its course. Now the general turns his focus on the mineral stones and crystals positioned atop the ramps in the Great Gallery. They were everywhere. As he walked down, Ninurta stopped by each one of them to declare its fate. Were it not for breaks in the clay tablets on which the text was written, we would have had the names of all 27 of them. As it is, only 22 names are legible. Several of them Ninurta ordered to be crushed or pulverized. Others, which could be used in the new Mission Control Center, were ordered given to Shamash, and the rest were carried off to Mesopotamia to be displayed in Ninurta's temple. In Nippur and elsewhere as a constant evidence of the great victory of Enlil and over the Enki gods. All this Ninurta announced he was doing not only for his sake, but for future generations too. Let the fear of thee, the great pyramid, be removed from my descendants. Let their peace be ordained. And so that was the stronghold of Enki. And it was powerful. And guys, even in modern times, they use crystals in the first radios. Remember that? And so that power, there's something there that they can use to, again, frequency, vibration, power, energy. It's amazing. But that's what the pyramids were built for, and that's why they stand empty now. Guys, I got several more of these videos coming up. I think it's an amazing story. It's backed up by the cuneiform Sumerian text, the oldest writings, and it overlaps with Daniel. We'll get to that part, the Persian king and the angels fighting. All of that is going to come out before this series is over with. But this is so intriguing to me that now we have an idea, again, written in stone, of what they were, who did it, and the unbelievable power of these crystals. Again, he said some from earth, some from heaven. So they were miners. They could scan. They knew there was gold. They more than likely knew where these crystals were because some came from here. Some came on their ships. And I thought it's very interesting, guys. Thank you for watching. What these updates will be coming. It's getting easier and easier. Things are lightening up. So just hang with me. Be safe.